Hi, everybody, and welcome to the After School Sucks special for August 2nd, 2012. We have open phones, so we will take your calls, but we wanted to continue in a similar direction to what we were doing in the regular show. And in fact, here's an interesting thing that's never happened before. This might actually become the regular show for this week, as far as the podcast is concerned, because we had a multitude of technical difficulties, mostly related to video. In the beginning, they were related to audio. Before the show even started, I had a small fire. The lights up there, this light that's behind me.
Oh, my.
It started to make a sound. And then there was smoke and a burning smell.
And where there's smoke,
there will be fire.
That's terrible. However, did you manage to save your life and not burn the whole place down?
Well, these bulbs, these spirally bulbs,
Yeah.
I hear if they break, you have to call like a hazmat team.
Yeah, apparently there's a federal law that says that's the case.
So there's a very good chance that what you're hearing now I might not even release what we just did for the last. Well, I mean, I'll put it in I'll put it on the website.
Sure.
And maybe on YouTube. But it might not be the podcast for this week. So what I wanted to do was I could start by sharing an email that I got from a listener recently. And we're probably going to wind up covering some of the same ground that we already covered. But I thought this was interesting. And I've received a few emails like this in the past. It's from a listener named James. Came to me yesterday. What's the day? Is today the 3rd? 2nd?
Duh. It's the 2nd, I
Came
think.
to me within the last, we'll say 6 weeks. That's definitely accurate.
Within the last 6 weeks, certainly.
Yes, because I'm thinking it wasn't even more than 3 days ago. So 6 weeks is safe. I always like to start at the beginning of a podcast series, and I'm up to about number 20 of School Sucks. Thank you so much for articulating this information. It's changing my life. That's always nice to hear.
That is.
I'm passing it on to a few students in government schools that I know. Wow, if the internet had existed when I was a student, I can't imagine how different my life would have been. Growing up in a small town in Oklahoma in the 1970s was a bleak period for information access. It's taken me the rest of my life to discover sources of liberating information like yourself. So successfully, I was brainwashed. I'm writing to ask how to educate young people. I have a daughter who just turned 3. We've planned on homeschooling her all along, but didn't have a clear plan. About a month ago, I found out about the Trivium and have been taking in as much information as I can about that. What I haven't found much information on is what education looks like at earlier stages of development. Do you have children of your own? Can you point me to any books or other resources? I don't have trust in an unknown book I'd find on the shelf at the bookstore. I don't have time or skills to research that material. I'm a product of the public schools. I've been lied to and dumbed down. They managed to turn me into an insecure and confused person. I don't have a clear map of reality in my own head. I need to learn along with my daughter, but more information relating to the younger ages would help. Thank you for your work. So,
Tricky question to answer. I mean, there's a lot that goes into as they call it, early childhood education, especially around the ages of 2 to 4 is a very important time.
Yeah, but there's a lot of natural processes going on at that time as well.
Right, and those natural processes as in learning processes, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you see a toddler like playing or like, getting into things, all the stuff that like they train you to stop doing when you go to school, that's not just play. It's not just, messing things up, making a mess for the sake of making a mess. Everything a child does at that age is part of this huge existential research program, really, that they're involved in, learning what it means to be a person.
So what does learning look like? To answer James' question, as a young child, what does learning look like? It looks a lot like living, I would say.
Yeah.
It looks like the natural life and activities of a child.
We don't remember that part of our lives that clearly once we become adults because, a lot of how we think forms at that time. So it's very difficult to hold on to. We don't remember, but all that playing that kids do, and we think, oh, the kids are silly, they just play all the time. There's a very important reason for that.
Yeah.
You know,
that exploratory process that I think would be habit forming if at the age of 6 things weren't drastically changed and very unnatural things start to happen. So, I don't think that people need to be overly concerned with what education should look like at that age, because it's happening, because it's natural, because your child is living, your child is exploring, your child's natural gifts are completely unaffected by any sort of outside influence or unnatural forces. So it's happening. I think this goes into what we were talking about before as well, that the language needs to change and the mindset needs to change. Schooling puts us in a box, and I'm not talking about all the ways we normally talk about on this show, like giving us a safe range of outcomes that are desirable for people who might like to control us. Right. Those boxes are all there as well. But our experience and how just pervasive the schooling is in our culture, in our society, in our political thinking as adults, in our interface or how we interact with society, there's a box there as well, because specifically with how we think and talk about learning and education, it's all done with this terminology that we learned through the schooling process.
Right.
And that's something that I think is very important for us to let go of completely. We talked about all of these words, right? Level, grade, what else? Teaching. Teaching was the big one. Because parents will ask, how do I teach my child?
Right. How do I teach my kid rather than how do I let my kid learn?
Right. How do I get out of the way? So I think that James's email is very thoughtful here. And if a few clicks of a mouse or a few flips of pages through a book happened for many, many other parents, they would find themselves having the same questions. Right. And the same dilemma, and maybe some of the same anxiety that he feels about having a 3-year-old daughter.
Right.
Like, I can't send her to school, but I don't know what to do. And he was very forthright that, hey, I'm a product of these schools. I don't have a clear map of reality. I'm confused about where to go. And I think that even though that's sad, and of course we've all been there, I think, or most of us have been there, most of us know how that feels, or we can remember how that feels. The acknowledgement of that is very important, and the willingness to learn along with a child, I think, is the most important thing, because there is really no formula. Like, right. I don't think people can be helpful guides, and people can say, I did this and it worked for my child when we lived here, right. and he or she was this many years old. But schooling is about formulas for teaching
right.
the same thing to everybody. Natural education, home education. I don't even want to call it homeschooling, unschooling. We can get away from the schooling word, you right. are doing something to your child kind of language.
The whole idea that there is a formula that'll work for everybody is a trick that that they've pulled on us. The government schooling has led us to assume that there is a right way to do it. Because they'll tell you theirs is the right way, and you may be smart enough, you may be observant enough to figure out that their way isn't the right way, and then you go start looking what the right way is.
Sure.
But there won't be a right way that's right for everybody, of course.
This is also,
it seems obvious when I say it like that, but most people don't ever consider it.
Yeah. And you can see how quickly that we can get trapped by this kind of thinking, too, in all of our conversations that come from the philosophy of liberty and are applicable to defense or economics or education, where people want us to talk in the box like the politicians
right.
talk to them, like B.F. Skinner might have talked to his little rats, okay, well, what's the solution? Give me a plan. Where are the answers?
Right.
And it's okay to have some humility and say, I don't know.
Right.
I've never even met everybody's child, so how would
Right.
I know what would be good for them?
It's kind of like if you took one of B.F. Skinner's rats out of his box that has the food pellet button in it, and then you released him into the wild.
Yeah.
Like, he wouldn't know how to take care of himself. He would just always be looking around going, well, where's my food button? And I think that's what how we end up feeling, you know, if you take your child out of school, you're going to be looking to replace it with something similar.
Yeah. So
Because that's our tendency.
and what's unfortunate is that this child, this 3-year-old, and a lot of people are in the same situation that James finds himself in. This child has never even been to school,
Right.
But from their point of view, they don't have to worry about that imagery that I used so many times earlier in the show today of the teacher within, the curiosity being choked and poisoned by the system.
Right.
That's never happened to them. There's nothing for them to recover from. But what's sad, but I also think is very important to point out, is that the parents of that child have been through that. And it
Right.
has shaped their attitudes and their outlook about what education should be. And if there's this absence, if there's this vacuum where school is for everybody else, what do we fill it with?
Right.
You know? So I think that that's something that, I mean, James, you're doing all the right things, and I think you're asking all the right questions. But you need to also really be as aware as possible. And it sounds like from what I read that you're being pretty honest with yourself about this, that you need to distance and detach yourself from everything, from all of your associations and all of your conceptions of what schooling should be. And, you know, schooling and learning are opposites. Just like we go back to that young child who's never been in school, learning and living are synonymous.
Right.
So people talk about learning so often as if it's like something separate from life.
Yes.
Like, oh, I go to this place from 8 to 3
And I learn, and then I stop learning and do my thing.
until I have to do homework at 5, which is more learning.
Right.
But then, like, when I'm not learning, I do stuff I like, which is weird because that's
Yeah.
when the best learning takes place.
Right, because you're engaged and you're interested in the subject matter and you're pursuing it for your own edification.
Yeah. Terminology is very important. I said that I have watched an 8-year-old boy learn as much in 10 minutes, a willing, curious, and confident child learn in 10 minutes as much as I could teach a group of 16 and 17-year-old high school students in a week, right? Because teaching is this imposition.
Right.
And learning is not. So this is also, we were supposed to have Lorette Lynn on the show tonight, and this is one of the most valuable things that I've learned from her, is that you are not going to do something to your child, right?
Right.
Like everything that we've learned, I think, pretty much in our adult lives. And you have less college than me, so you had like more of a head start on this too, probably, in your own life, where I was stuck in that place having my opinions formed for me without
Right.
much critical thinking. And like this is where it first occurred to me that I might actually be smart. But when my history teacher, who was this progressive but very challenging in the way he taught and what he expected out of students, what he said or communicated to me through a variety of ways, that I had promised that I had potential, that I had intelligence, that he was impressed with what I was doing in his class, I'm kind of thinking it had a lot to do with how well I repeated his views back to him.
I had a teacher like that in my senior year of high school. He was an English teacher, and he kind of bucked the system because he didn't give us things like written tests and stuff we didn't just sit down and take a test. Everything was all essays. We would have to write, our thoughts about a piece and give it, which it seemed like it was a step in the right direction in terms of helping people figure things out for themselves, figure out their own thoughts. But then I started gaming the system by just figuring out and just by listening to him and figuring out exactly how cynical he was, writing something just as cynical and getting an A because, it agreed with his perception.
So James also mentions, and Corey, I don't know how familiar you are with this because I don't know if we've talked about it on the show when you've been on before, the trivium.
Sorry, no.
The trivium is kind of a shorthand. It goes way back. Some people are somewhat critical of the terminology because it has some religious tie-ins, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with religion as far as its practical application is concerned. The trivium is a 3-step process. Trivium, where 3 roads meet, pretty much, was what it means. And it deals with the 3 components of critical thinking for autodidacts, and this can also kind of be correlated with classical education or the tools of self-teaching. So the 3 parts of the trivium, the first one is grammar, understanding the actual nuts and bolts language of a certain subject area. What do words mean? And then we have the logic. How do these words work together? And then the rhetoric. How do you take the grammar that you've learned, the logic that integrates that grammar, and communicate it to other people effectively? So that's in a nutshell. I mean, this is a subject where there can be a tremendous amount of scholarship, and Jan Irvin, who does the Gnostic Media podcast, has a whole website. I think it's just trivium.com. There was a band called Trivium too. So he might not have gotten away with trivium.com.
Yeah.
But I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And, of course, tragedyandhope.com is a great resource for this stuff as well. But I brought that up because I think it relates to our conversation very well. This language is something that needs a closer evaluation, a reevaluation, really. You know, when we're talking about education, we really have to cleanse that word of all our preconceived notions that were formed in school. Right. So if the grammar is out of place, you know, our logic can be fine and the way we communicate or share ideas can be fine, but it can still be disastrous in the end. So, for example, if we agree on the logic of ginger ale is good for an upset stomach, and we communicate that idea effectively to people, it seems like everything would go well. But if we go back to the grammar of that, and we find that we've all decided to call a handful of thumbtacks ginger ale, that's not good for an upset stomach and the rest of the process, and, you know, that does not have a good outcome.
Right.
So is the case with school.
Okay.
Right? Schooling and education, right? Schooling is not ginger ale. It's a handful of thumbtacks.
Right.
You know, your mind is an upset stomach. So, oh, man. James, I think you're still obviously holding on to some of those ideas, but I really think that you're on the right track as far as realizing that and trying to really purge your thinking of all of those associations that come from school. This was actually something that I wanted to share earlier, but we didn't get a chance. It's from a website called 0 to 3, which has to do with early childhood and parenting. And the title of this is Tips on Nurturing Your Child's Curiosity. Babies are born learners with a natural curiosity to figure out how the world works. Curiosity is the desire to learn. It is an eagerness to explore, discover, and figure things out. The more curious a child is, the more he learns. Nurturing your child's curiosity is one of the most important ways you can help her become a lifelong learner. Parents and caregivers don't have to make their children curious or push their children to learn. In fact, research shows that it is a child's internal desire to learn, their curiosity, not external pressure, that motivates him to seek out new experiences and lead to greater success in school over the long term. Well, curiosity, I disagree with that, and obviously this the author of this article might be coming from a totally different point of view than we are with respect to school, but I think that that's a valid point. Curiosity doesn't really work in school.
No, you get shot down.
Right,
Curious.
Yeah. You can certainly land yourself in trouble. And there's lip service paid to everything in school, so it's not explicit that curiosity is frowned upon.
Right.
But one time I remember curiosity not being popular at all was college. right? And that's the curiosity. If it's like, are there other explanations besides the one that you're putting forward,
Right.
Mr. or Mrs. Professor? And I don't want to apply this across the board. I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but I think there are certainly college professors who like that environment because they have a very captive audience of very spongy, uncritical minds, the products of the public school,
Right.
where they can have their House of Cards belief system parroted back to them, in this echo chamber. And, for a self-important kind of person, it's a really nice place to be.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the people I've met who are actually professionally in academia at the college level, as a professor, I've never met one of them who didn't think that, the way he saw everything was exactly how it was. And if the only way that you can get him to even acknowledge that another point of view exists is to get him to argue against it.
Sure.
And all of the work and all the research they do is all just finding ways to shore up, their views on the world. And instead of going, is there another way?
Yeah.
They set out to find evidence that supports what they already believe.
And there's, confirmation bias. That was actually what I was
Right.
talking about in my segment by myself when I started the show today. And there's different levels of humility that go with that. I mean, some of them may acknowledge that they have one side of two. Some may not. And I know this from experience because when I was a young teacher, I took the views that were basically inflicted upon me about history and government and politics and economics in high school and early in my career, inflicted them on other people. And I talked a little bit during our show about some of the strategies that I was using to encourage this synthetic curiosity in high school students. Have a hook, have something that gets them interesting. Present a conflict. Introduce the ideas that there are multiple ways to think about something.
Right.
So the example I gave was like, how did we get here? All these different theories of creation and evolution and de-evolution and genetic engineering by aliens and all this. But I knew in the end, I was steering them back towards evolution.
Right.
And I had to be judicious about the information that I presented and careful about how I made sure it wound up back where I needed it to be. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But this applied pretty much to everything I did. This was my mistake. Like, yes, let's have a conversation about all of your different ideas. When you're done talking, I'll tell you how it is. Which is pointless, which is kind of a pointless exercise. And I think if you're not careful about how you do it, you can lead to people feeling dumb and ultimately less confident in their their decision-making skills, their opinions, the validity of their opinions, because you say, oh, well, thank you for filling up some time with your adorable ideas.
Right.
But this is the way things really were,
Right.
are, so on and so forth. The author goes on here and says, curiosity is something that babies are born with. They come into the world with a drive to understand how the world works. A newborn follows sounds, faces, interesting objects with their eyes. An 8-month-old shakes their rattle and puts it in their mouth to see what the object can do. Let's jump to something that's more helpful to James. A 2-year-old pretends she is the garbage collector and puts all of her stuffed animals into the laundry basket, garbage truck, to figure out what it feels like to be in the other person's shoes. Below you'll find a series of tips for ways you can nurture, not force or make your child curious, but nurture them, support the curiosity that's already there, model interest in the world around you. This is something that I think people should try to do at all ages. With all, if
Right.
they are some kind of educator or facilitator of an educational experience, that's very important.
And the truth is, we spend more time kind of suppressing that natural curiosity. When children go through that phase where they ask you why, they're just constantly asking why. And then you tell, why is the sky blue? And you could tell them, but there's always going to be a fact in there that we assume. But the kids will always go, why?
Right.
Why are you going to bed? Because I'm tired. Why? Because I worked all day. Why? Because I need money. And they'll keep going forever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
You
sure.
know, because they literally know nothing about the world. These things that we assume are true and are just accepted as facts, they have no knowledge of that.
And I mean, I think that adults still have this for areas that are interesting to them. Like, there is nothing more frustrating than a mystery in an area where you're very interested or engaged or have some kind of emotional involvement. Like, there can't be unknowns in certain things. There's the problem of the absence of knowledge that needs to be solved.
Right.
You know, a lot of people, this might only manifest in negative ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sometimes people in relationships get to be very nosy, you know,
Yes.
and especially in today's age of information. And this is something that actually happens a lot. And I've, talked to friends of mine who are girls and friends of mine who are guys, and I think this has even happened to me in the past. People will go through another person's stuff
Oh, yeah.
through their email, you know?
Whitney Houston had a whole song about it.
Really?
Yeah. And then she had a song called It's Not Right, But It's Okay, ostensibly about her boyfriend cheating on her. But the song was really about her snooping on him. Like, she talks about digging his credit card receipts out of the garbage when he said he was out with his friends. And if you were out with your friends, how come only 2 people had dinner? Or
Yeah.
going through his phone, going through the call, the recent calls on his phone to see who's calling him. Who's calling you from this area code? Who's this? You know?
Now, that's probably one of the worst ways that desire to close those gaps, to fill in those blanks in information can manifest for a person. But I think it speaks to that very very natural and what can be a very healthy drive
To find out more.
Find out more about something that you're interested in. Like,
Right.
sometimes you just can't be stopped. Unless somebody could put you in an environment where they ultimately make you interested in nothing.
Yes. They convince you that history is boring, that math is boring.
Yeah, exactly. So the second piece of advice I also agree with very much: follow your child's lead. If you're an adult and you've been through something like 16 or 18 years of institutionalized schooling, your 3 or 4-year-old child has a better built-in teacher than you do, in my opinion. The author writes, encourage natural interest. Children learn so much more through activities that capture their attention and imagination. If he likes music, play it for him often. Make and play instrumentals together. Dance together. If bugs are her thing, give her a shovel and a net. Find books on bugs and read to her. A couple more that are helpful here, and James, I hope you find some of this information useful. Answer questions simply and clearly according to your child's development. So I think this is what you were just speaking to, Corey, with all the why questions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also okay to say that you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Louis C.K. has a funny bit where he he takes the why questions all the way to the point where he has to admit to his daughter that he's stupid because he didn't pay attention in school and smoked too much pot, and his parents were stupid and were bad people. So your child should know, in my opinion anyway, that you're a learner too.
Right.
Right?
That you're a role model for them, in learning.
But this is something that goes on forever.
Yeah. But instead of it going on forever and us continually improving ourselves as we grow up, instead we get put through this system where they teach us that learning is boring. And as soon as you can get away with not learning anything anymore, you should stop learning.
Oh, sure.
And
yeah.
like I told the story about my high school physics class where I didn't do homework and how I learned that the real point is not to make sure you learn things, it's that you shut up and do what you're told.
Right.
That's the important lesson I walked out of high school with.
Yeah. Stimulate your child with open-ended questions. This was something that I tried to do when I was a teacher, but again, this still has that top. Even this article, which I don't think is too bad, and I don't want to say is unenlightened. It still kind of has. It's still in the paradigm of
top-down
the
teaching.
top-down. Not too much. It's not that bad. It's not saying do this specific thing, set this specific routine. And I think that we might be in a place where this is actually necessary because this is how people think about their relationship with their children. So they can't just you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Let them go. They're better at it than you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's I think for people who are so schooled in a society that is so schooled, that's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
Create an interesting environment. That is something that I think is a parent's job. And certainly there are situations where parents have to intervene for safety reasons. There are times where maybe some redirection is needed for safety reasons. But that has a lot to do with being proactive and setting up the right environment to keep a child safe. And I think that could also apply to keeping a child interested and engaged, because a child who is 3 or 4 years old will not bring a list to a parent and say, these are the things that I need to feed my curiosity. Right. So the parent, as an observer, can watch that happen and then respond and create that environment for them. So being proactive is very important.
I don't know. I honestly, my gut, I haven't done as much research on this, obviously, as the person who wrote this article or as you, but my feeling is that people worry so much about what do I do to get my child interested in learning, especially at that young age. I mean, what do I do to get my toddler interested in learning? I think that's not something you really need to worry about, because look at how much trouble government school has to go through to get them to stop being curious, to get them to stop wanting to learn.
Oh yeah,
it takes a lot of time and effort. It takes years to accomplish.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I mean, they've got it down to a science, but it does still take years. I mean, so the trick is, I don't think keeping your children interested in learning is really the problem. It's knowing, what to do with yourself, because you always assumed at some point that I'll watch the kid for a couple of years, help them figure out some of the basics of life, and then I'll let somebody else teach them.
It takes us back to the trivium, too. Like a child's desire to do step one, to learn language, to make meaning, is very natural.
Right.
A child's desire to form concepts, to get rid of contradictions, is natural. A child's desire to communicate effectively and clearly and in a meaningful and beneficial way with other people is natural, right? But as far, people can be polite, people they can say thank you, they can hold a door for you, they can behave well at work, but people seem to have, from my experience anyway, and it's something that I find very frustrating in different aspects of my social life, is people are afraid of communicating anything meaningful to each other.
That's true.
And all of that other stuff is natural, meaning that it's instantaneous. Going back to what you were saying about how much work school has to do.
Yeah.
That takes 15,000 hours.
Right.
You're not there because you got 15,000 hours worth of information. I mean, there's a variety of reasons why people are in school that long. A lot of it has to do with political reasons and union control of the school system. Lots of places have made kindergarten part of the mandatory public education. There's lots of places that are talking about making preschool. I mean, they want state-run education from birth.
Jeez.
So that's something that's been in the work, but kindergarten has been sort of consumed by the 1 through 12 public education now in many states.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it's so commonly part of K through 12 rather than 1 through 12 that I didn't even know there were places where it wasn't part of the whole mandatory 12 years.
Sure. It never was in New Hampshire. My kindergarten when I was in school was private. So there's just a couple more here that I wanted to go over. Next one says, redirect, don't discourage. Try to figure out what is capturing her interest or what she is trying to master and create a safe and acceptable way for her to explore. For young children, I think this is very important. Parents do need to be involved for safety's sake. For example, if your toddler is exploring the houseplants, pull them out, put them out of reach, but offer a close alternative. Put some dirt in a plastic container for your child to play with and inspect. If she likes to pour water from her cup onto the high chair or the floor, move her to the kitchen floor, bathtub, or backyard after a meal so she can explore and experiment with water without driving you crazy. This will also teach children problem-solving skills, creative and acceptable ways to do and get what they want. No, I don't have much of a problem with that. No. I mean, if you're in charge of one thing as the parent, it certainly is the environment.
Right.
The last one is allow time for open-ended activities. Unlike some toys that are designed to be used in a certain way, materials like boxes, blocks, water, sand, pots, and pans, and any art material can be used imaginatively. Do not tell your child what to do with the material or how to do it or what it should look like in the end. Let your child's curiosity be her guide.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I really like that one. I think that's great.
Because, I mean, the thing is, although I think it's selling the imagination of a small child somewhat short. Because if you think that they can only take something like a box or a pot or a pan and use, or art supplies and use them imaginatively, like children do everything imaginatively. Even if a toy is meant to be played with a certain way, they're going to find new ways to play with it because they don't have a lifetime of experience. Like we were projecting our lifetime of experience onto them. So that, because we know there are certain ways that things get done, right? So we project onto them that, well, if we give them a toy that is supposed to be played with a certain way, then they're going to play with it a certain way. It's going to stunt their imagination. That's not what kids are like at all, though. They don't really do anything the way it's supposed to be done. That's all they have is their imagination to figure out how things get done.
I wonder how many toys and games were invented through what you're just describing. Like, oh, I never would have thought of doing that.
Yeah,
with that.
Just watching toddlers.
Yeah.
Going, hey, whoa. I mean, how else do you invent something like that toy where you had a cup on a stick and then a string with a ball on it and you got to try to catch it? Like, would a rational person invent a game like that?
I don't know.
Or would a wildly imaginative 2-year-old invent a game like that? I don't know.
I would invent that now. I think that. Have you ever done that? I bet that's a blast.
Yeah, somebody. Well, I mean, it's obviously somebody beat you to the punch, but
yeah, it's unfortunate.
But yeah.
But I think that as we get older, we see, and obviously, there's cultural and societal and marketing, advertising pressures on this as well. But toys have very specific purposes.
But nowadays, toys sell. Toys are there to be sold or to sell you on a TV show or vice versa.
Sure. Oh, and the whole thing that the author was talking about, when you're done, put this together and it will look like this.
Right.
Follow these instructions. And that's a different skill, maybe for a different time. Like, here's how to build something using a plan.
Right.
It's not bad.
No.
But it's a different, it's nurturing and fostering and maybe building different skills than curiosity is. So even with something that has like a specific purpose. Like I remember when I was a kid, Matchbox cars were huge, but little kids still find exciting. And I've seen like 2 and 3 year olds do wild things with Matchbox cars and dinosaurs.
Sure.
There are no rules.
No.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice because when kids are get older and certainly adults when they want to have fun, it's never like let's get some boxes. Let's get some boxes, a couple gallons of water, see where it goes.
Yeah. Let's see what water does when you pour it out of a cup. We're there. We know what water does when you pour it out of a cup, but a 2-year-old doesn't know that.
But I mean, even an adult version of that kind of thinking is so rare. When a group of friends get together and they say, I mean, we do it, but to say, let's play Scrabble.
Right.
But no one ever says, let's make up a game.
Right.
Right. Which might be a wild time and a lot of fun.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that you're exactly right.
Did we just invent let's make up a game night?
I think we might have. I mean, the whole with due respect to the person who invented the concept of let's make up a game.
Right.
We're having let's make up a game night where it's a regular thing.
Sure. Yeah.
We can just get like a bunch of like random parts, like dice and like little, counters from board games, and then make something out of it.
We could get a fishbowl. Here I am making up the rules already.
All right.
We could get a fishbowl and just put all different components of all different kinds of games on little pieces of paper and put them in the fishbowl. And so every different time you pick 10 or 15 of them. And
then we'd have to figure out how to put like Monopoly and Connect 4 together and make a game out of it.
Holy shit.
I know, right? You know what? Actually, there is one area where adult people tend to be creative and make up their own games, and that's drinking games. That's the one time they don't seem to be shy about making up, like, play and games as adults is drinking games.
Adults are also creative in other ways as well, and they can really put their imagination to use, thinking of things to worry about.
Yeah.
Thinking of things to be afraid of. Coming up with rationalizations for why things need to be the way they are.
Right.
Why the status quo is good. Unfortunately, all of that is a waste, though.
Yeah.